You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading. Guess I got bored.
Hello and welcome to TFM's local books and comic show here for Star Trek. And I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and I am so excited to be with the one and only Casey Pettitt.
Hello.
How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I don't have anything. I'm ready to move on to more Star Trek books. And yeah, I've been reading like crazy though. Reading Game of Thrones now. So,
ooh, okay, excellent.
Yeah, expanding my horizons outside of Star Trek for once.
Where are you in the series?
Like just about to finish the first book.
Okay. It's funny because you're starting the first book in that series, and I am on the penultimate book of the Expanse series now. So I'm wrapping that series up because they finally released the paperback version of the last book, and I had all the other paperbacks, so I was just waiting. And then I'll be able to go see how they wrapped up the Amazon version of that. So that'll be fun. But we're not here to talk about all those other books. We're here to talk about Star Trek books and comics. And before we do that, of course, we just thank you for listening. We really appreciate everybody enjoying Literary Treks. And if you are... consider give us a star rating review on Apple Podcasts. And it's been a very long time. I think it's been almost 3 years since we've had anybody review us over there. And so it'd be great to get some new reviews, help people continue to find the show. It's a lot of fun, though, as we've been digging into Star Trek books and comics here. And, of course, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and you want to make sure you are subscribed so you get the shows as soon as they drop. You can also find us on social media at Trek FM, on Twitter, or on Instagram at Trek FM, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Trek FM. You can also find a listeners-only discussion group called the Babel Conference, which allows you to talk to listeners from all over the world there on Facebook. You can just join that by typing Babel into the search field, and you'll find us. We can let you in, and you can talk to everyone. It's a lot of fun. And, of course, you can also find us online at Trek.fm and all that we're doing there. We would really appreciate, though, if you would go over to Patreon and support the network, just like Casey Pettitt or Greg Rosier, who are associate producers here on Literary Treks. They make sure that not only this show, but the content around the network keeps coming to you. And it's a lot of money to put all this together, and so we need your help. So go over to patreon.com/TrekFM and become part of our team. So, Casey, as has become the custom now on Literary Treks, I feel like every time we record, we have a lot of comics to talk about because we've had so many series running at the same time. And before we dive into the actual 3 comics we have to talk about, there is going to be a short-run series that's going to be coming out here. It looks like in April, starting with the first issue, Deep Space Nine, The Dog of War. It's going to be taking place during, it looks to be the 6th season possibly here of Deep Space Nine. And this will, I think it's going to be 3 issues, it looks like, as well as I'm looking on the IDW site. So that will be kind of fun. But this is going to be interesting because apparently there's a Borg component discovered by the crew set to uncover Cardassian technology after the station's reoccupation. All right. So it's basically supposed to be a lost episode of that season. So between 5 and 6 there, when the station was occupied by the Cardassians again. So, oh my gosh, I love the idea of being back in Deep Space Nine. I find it interesting that there is a corgi on the cover. Yes. So that is fascinating to me. I wonder how that plays in. But, any reason to get back to Star Trek Deep Space Nine in that time period, I'm pretty good with.
Yes, same here. And, it's got some cool alternate covers, too. One of them's got kind of, blueprint schematic kind of things of Deep Space Nine. And then, just the normal cover, like you said, with the corgi on the front, which looks very interesting. But the artwork, even just on the cover, looks pretty good. So, obviously we'll be taking a look at these when they come out and giving our honest opinion about a dog on Deep Space Nine.
Yes. I mean, who knew that we were going to, get a dog on Deep Space Nine? But so with that, Casey, we dive right into Resurgence 5. This is the final issue of this leading into the video game. And I was wondering how you felt like this series ended wrapping up because, I feel like we've really been high on praise for Resurgence. So do you feel like it really landed the starship here?
Yeah, I mean, we knew this whole time that this series was leading into a game, and so it's kind of hard not to think about that as you're seeing some of the scenes that play out in here. But the way that the comic ends, especially, I mean, the whole issue here is very dramatic and action packed and everything. But it's not so much a cliffhanger as just, I would say, an unexpected ending to the comic, with, the crew that we end it with at the end of the book or the end of the comic. And I'm still left very eager to see this game and, hopefully to be able to play it someday. 'Cause I'd like to see where they take the story in the game from here. Mm-hmm. Because it was a good comic, and I wouldn't mind seeing more with some of these people.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things here is the way that we wrap this up. We end up having this brand new warp drive that Leah Brahms has been working on, seemingly not be able to sustain itself, and but it also leads to the death of one of the main characters we've been following in the series, Sutherland. And we also then, and because of that as well, everybody ends up with basically a pardon for their part in this. Leah Brahms is put back to work. She's never to speak of this again. The captain of the Resolute is given the Resolute back, told never to speak of this again. And so there's this mystery, I feel like, that is kind of leading into the game now. But, this did feel like a good Star Trek story set in this time period, and I liked it. And whether or not I ever play the game, to me, this was a good way of telling a Star Trek comic story that had a nice arc, start to finish, and I thought it was well done, and I really ended up enjoying the series, which, I felt like it's kind of just been a long time since one of the series really captured my attention and had me from start to finish.
Yeah, I agree. Like the characters are well fleshed out. We get characters that we recognize, that we get a little bit of more time with. And, overall, just, the game aside, the artwork was consistent throughout. It was pretty decent artwork. And like you said, the story was good. It was a good Star Trek story. It was, as I was reading the ending where everyone's kind of almost getting off scot-free, like they're kind of getting a slap on the wrist. Part of me was like, why does everybody always get away with everything in Starfleet? But at the same time, that's kind of how it works, and we want to see this crew continue. So I didn't have too much of a problem with. But yeah, I think if you like comic books and you like Star Trek comics, this is a new crew, a new ship, but it's definitely worth the read, whether or not you're going to be playing the game. Mm-hmm. I'd say pick these ones up for sure.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. So it was great to be able to wrap up this series. And, it, like you, I am intrigued about the idea of this game. And so if the game itself got good reviews, it might be something that I would possibly pick up to see what it's like. I loved playing Elite Force back in the day. And so, yeah, I think that's really fun. So Star Trek V continues our ongoing series now, our current Star Trek Legacy series, wink, wink. And so this one was crazy. I mean, the only way I know how to explain what happened in this issue is that it was BS crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it either. There's so much that happens in this, and it was exciting to see. And then it's just another good action-packed story, continuing what we've seen in the previous issues, but also maybe presenting a nice jumping off point for, I don't know, a spin-off. And
yes.
we get Worf encountering Alexander, who's following this I guess Kahless, the Kahless clone on his ship, and
crazy Kahless.
And Worf is worried about him for once, and he doesn't. It's nice seeing this tension between Worf and Sisko, who served together for a long time, and Sisko is like, we've got to go, destroy these ships, we've got to go, stop Kahless from doing this, and Worf is kind of telling him like, hang on, my son's over there, and wants to save him, essentially, which is a little bit of a different Worf than we've seen before. So, as far as even remembering who Alexander was or something, but it was definitely fun to see that. And then, like I said, the action in this is really good. And then to get to that last page and see "to be concluded," which tells me that we're going to have one more issue in this ongoing series, and then maybe we'll move on to another story with Sisko and his crew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I remember correctly, too, we're getting the Day of Blood crossover, and so I think that's going to start that arc. That's going to be going back and forth between Star Trek and the Defiant series that's happening now as well. So I think that's where that's going to come in. But no, I 100% agree with you. I mean, this is just an incredibly interesting issue. I really loved, Sisko struggling with the choice between what the prophets are telling him and, the desire of Worf, to have his son protected. And, I think it was really great because in classic Star Trek fashion, Worf is able to find a different way of handling this, which was very cool and gets them what they want. But it also leads to this schism between Worf and, Captain Sisko. And so I loved all that. And I thought it was, in many ways, a very organic way of getting Worf on the Defiant. And so then we end up with two comics that are running parallel, telling different parts of this story. And I think what it does is it allows, Worf to be able to, really track down Kahless, and then it allows Sisko to be able to continue on a different thread. And so that was excellent, which I think leads us right into Star Trek Defiant, which picks up Worf's story as he leaves the Theseus and how he gets this, ragtag crew of his own with the Defiant. And I thought that this was a smart way to tell the story, and also very enjoyable. The fact that, he runs into Ambassador Spock, and then, we pick up B'Elanna, and then we just get, we really kind of hit the ground running with him trying to recruit the right crew that he needs, and get on this mission of how he's going to be able to track Kahless.
Yeah, it really is a good a good continuation of Star Trek #5 or Star Trek Ongoing, really. And you and I were talking before we jumped on mic here on the other side of the page about, they should have put something at the beginning of each of the comics saying, hey, make sure you read Star Trek #5 first before you read Defiant. They give you little clues throughout the first Defiant issue. So if you're really not interested in reading the ongoing series, that's okay. But, this one is really just captivating from the start. Why Worf is doing what he's doing. And then, seeing Spock come in and B'Elanna, and then we get Ro at the very end, as he's kind of starting to round out his crew. And then the kind of, I don't know if it's a revelation or not that, we've got Lore, his head at the end there since he's on the cover. But, it's just a really cool way seeing how Worf is going about picking out his crew. He's stealing the Defiant, so I can only hear that music, the stealing the Enterprise music going on in my head. But, kind of showing this is going to be a different kind of Star Trek story with kind of almost like a Black Ops mission. I mean, they're not even wearing Starfleet uniforms in this, and they're literally stealing a ship. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see where they take these characters and how they weave it kind of in and out of the ongoing story and what other characters they're going to bring in. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think, again, both of these are kind of over the top and outlandish comics, which I think is perfect for a comic series. And so this is, to me, a great start for Star Trek Defiant. And it, like you said, it really does make me want to continue diving into this series and see where they're going to go. And so all in all, to me, comics have just been, I think, top notch over the last few months. And I don't know if there has really been a time where I've been more excited to be getting these issues month in and month out.
Yeah. Agreed. Like, I've never been much of a comic reader, but as we've been getting these, I just want more. And, I think next time we're getting another issue of the Strange New Worlds comic series, the Illyrian Enigma. And so that'll be really fun to get back into that one as well. I mean, it's nice having comics that we're excited to get into and see what's happening next. There's things that they can do in the comics that, they can tell shorter stories, but also longer stories. And we get the visual that we don't get from the novels either. And so we can get to see some of the aliens and everything. So it's really kind of a fun time for comic books right now. And I'm, really looking forward to see what IDW gives us next.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Casey, that is all of the comics that we have this week, but we are diving back into Star Trek Voyager. So I don't know, maybe we should ghost dance our way into the feature? All right, Casey. So we are picking right up where we left off with the first book in the Dark Matter series. And we kind of end up with a few different storylines running throughout. And last time we left off, Paris and Chakotay had just jumped through a portal to an alien world, and we find out that that alien world that they landed on is the same planet that Hala is from, who is now with the Voyager crew. And her planet is made up of actually two different castes. You have the Alan caste, and they are people on this planet who have completely rejected basically what's natural. They're all into science and technology to the extreme. They don't have music or art. They don't eat anything that's non-replicated. And then you have the Koloan, and they are basically what we are considered primitives. They're completely of the land. They have art, they have music, and they live by what the Alalan consider superstition. In fact, they even kind of sacrifice their children who are not born perfect to what they consider their gods, the crafters, kind of much like the ancient Spartans. So first, I just kind of wanted to ask you how you felt about this part of the story, because it does take up, a good third of the time that we are in this book.
Yeah, this was really interesting. I'm glad we kind of started off with this story, and also just that we spent so much time here, because, in the last book, Chakotay kind of grabs the wounded Paris and then just go through the door. And like, even in this one, Chakotay says he doesn't even know why he did it. He didn't have time to explain it. He just knew that that's what he had to do. And he really, like, once we start to get to know these cultures, especially the Kululan, who are the more primitive ones, or the more spiritual, I guess, or, they live off the land, and the art and music and everything. It kind of is, right in Chakotay's wheelhouse, I guess. And I feel like with this story, having these two completely opposite ends of the spectrum casts on this planet really kind of shines light on, especially Chakotay as a character. I feel like he's kind of the embodiment of both cultures, I guess. He's a very spiritual person, but he also embraces the technology and the science, and he's trying to learn about the Kululan and their belief structure and how their world works, really, all the while knowing that they need to go over into the Alulan and to be able to try to figure out how to get back home, because obviously they need to at some point. So, but like the kind of world building or the culture, I felt like we're actually, although I don't know that they'd coexist so well on the same planet, like they were pretty well developed, I thought, and really interesting in their own right. And I found it interesting reading those parts of the story just to learn more about these aliens, and still kind of wondering what's going to happen with them. I mean, like, we're spending a lot of time with them and learning about them. Where do we go from here in the next book, with these cultures and coming together, especially now that Chakotay is kind of a bridge for these two cultures, and, how can he kind of help them learn to coexist with each other, maybe a little bit better than they have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I was interested in this part of the story, mainly because you have both of these sides of the coin, right? There are people who have become more advanced, and there are people who have stayed kind of in their more primitive form. And in many ways, they just reject out of hand everything the other group does as 100% evil, as if there's nothing neutral about what the other group does. Whether it's, the idea of rejecting music and art, or eating non-replicated food. And then they treat each other with broad brushstrokes. They think the worst of these people, even though there's good and bad to both sides. And that's something that I just wish it feels like there needs to be more explanation of that, and maybe it'll come to fruition in the third book, possibly. But I guess a big part of me was kind of left wondering exactly why this, and I think I'm going to say that a lot during this review, but so much of this, and I know this is the middle book of a trilogy, but this part of the story specifically just left me scratching my head as to why it's important at all, and there seemed to be no indication as to why it is, other than the fact that Hala is from this planet. And I don't know. I was just very perplexed.
Yeah, for as much time as we spent with this culture on this planet with Paris and Chakotay, it didn't really do anything to advance the dark matter story that we've been learning about, or that we've been reading about. And I have to hope that that the dark matter is gonna come into play somewhere here. I mean, they've built this whole thing about how their DNA is practically backwards from ours. Right. And so almost to say like that this is kind of almost like an opposite universe or something that they're in. And, with the shepherds and their technology and the fact that was essentially how Kala came to our universe, I guess, and then how Chakotay and Paris ended up at the other one. I presume that the shepherds are going to come into play here somewhere. We might even learn that they're part of this Alilan, like the technology-loving race on this planet. But if that's the case, they're burying the lead pretty good here. Yeah, I can only hope in the next book we actually get a satisfactory answer to what's going on here.
Well, I guess the only connection that I could make really was that maybe the dark matter had been infecting the way in which these people feel about one another, and that's why it's so stark. And then I think the strangest thing is that Chakotay realizes he needs to find the Alilan and ends up getting picked up by them, the same people who it's actually the brother of Kahala, and he's the one who goes and picks up the children when they're left at this sacred mountain, because they're not born perfect, basically. Mm-hmm. And there's been one of the members of this village who looks like they've committed suicide, but Paris realizes it's actually murder with what looks like a phaser wound. And I'm like, what in the world does this have to do with, like, how does this connect? And I guess the frustration is that I'm not really giving any clear indication in this middle book as to why this matters, which even in the middle part of a trilogy, you want to feel that the story is connecting with the rest of the whole. So you're not left with the thoughts that I'm having, which is, what the heck?
It'd be nice to still have a beginning, middle, and end, even in the middle book, to have
exactly
its own story, like this Ghost Dance. The name of the book is Ghost Dance. And, that's something Chakotay witnesses the Kululan doing, and he recognizes it as like an ancient, and it goes through this long, kind of explanation of what the Ghost Dance, was on Earth. And I still, now as I'm talking about it, I'm like, I don't know what that actually had to do with anything except to have a good name for the book. And it's a good name for a book.
Yeah.
But I don't know where it was taking us.
I know. I don't really either. So, I mean, maybe it connects to something else that happens in the book, which I guess, since I'm going to bring it up, we'll talk about it. But the entity, maybe that's the connection, is that the entity is the answer to the prayers, that the Ghost Dance was connected to Native Americans on our world and their prayers for retribution and salvation, basically, from their oppressors, and maybe the entity is the answer to that prayer. The entity, who is apparently the most single powerful being in this or any universe, and has been given a quest by this thing called the Presence to rid the galaxy of mutated dark matter as well. This may be another place where I was left scratching my head with the phrase, what the heck?
Yeah. That's every time an interlude came up, I was hoping for a little bit more, and I even wrote down that it was starting to feel like the interludes were really just a way for the author to add Easter eggs into the story, because the story didn't really lend itself to, the only Easter eggs, I guess, that we had in the Voyager story was really that Telek Ramor has shown up, but it's not really an Easter egg. He's just a character that showed up again. But this entity in the interludes is going around. It's encountering the Kazon Nistrum. It's even encountering Maj Kola and helping him to, get to know his son or something. Even if it doesn't last, the entity wants to witness this, but then it's, going around to other planets that Voyager has been to, throughout the Delta Quadrant. It just seemed kind of random, I guess, that we were seeing it. I was like, it's probably not Q. They brought up Q enough in the book that, this isn't him, obviously. The only other thing I can think of is this Wesley Crusher. Is this a traveler or something? And I really hope not, but I don't know. All I know is, we've got this entity doing the same thing that Voyager's doing, trying to clean up the mutated dark matter. So it maybe increase the page count a few pages.
Yeah, it felt like this entity, I don't know, it just felt like a bad trip. And I mean the hallucinogenic kind of trip. And so I just couldn't really figure out exactly what was going on. And again, it was one of those things and I think you really pinpointed this very well, which is that you do want each part of the trilogy to kind of have some kind of resolution to itself, but also feel like you are truly connected to what happened in the first book. And because the entity wasn't introduced in the first book at all, you are not necessarily understanding, okay, so they're also given this mission to rid the galaxy of mutated dark matter by something that we have no idea what it is. The presence, okay, all of these things are so vague as descriptions. I'm very, again, the word I come up with is perplexed as to how this really connects. And so at least we got, with the Romulan story, with Jekri and the Romulans, that Leah Yu, who is of the Shepherds and we know to be a bad Shepherd, is actually now seduced the Empress and is out for anybody who would stand in his way. And because, the leader of Tal Shiar, Jekri, realizes this, she actually goes to some Vulcans to learn some mental discipline, so she's not giving herself away so easily. And she ends up being betrayed by Varric, the one she was sleeping with at the end of the last book, who she thought was on her side. And at least this part of the story made sense and connected very well with where we had been in the previous book, and kind of upped the Liu Yu villain quotient. He's getting worse.
Yeah. I definitely thought that this was probably the best part of the book, honestly. It was interesting. And yeah, exactly. Liu Yu is now, he wasn't actually even in the book much. It's just the fact that he was even there and kind of right there on the Empress's elbow, practically, kind of almost the puppet master. And, with Jekri trying to, her quest was to really kind of find out the truth of, she still wants to get Voyager and, attack the Federation, but she's also trying to figure out what happened to all of their warbirds. She's essentially being blamed for it. But she knows that it's really bigger than that. And maybe it's, the Shepherd or, whatever, but she's actually being prevented from doing her job, and is, the kind of, I don't know, just she's the perfect character for this, like as the leader of the Tal Shiar, because she's already a spy and she's kind of almost on this internal spy mission, but she's also being kind of starting to get left out of everything. The Empress is basically turned against her because of Leia Yu, and she's just getting more and more frustrated. And as the reader, I was too, because she's constantly behind, and I thought it was just so interesting that she would go to the Vulcans and get some help and try to learn some of their ways, even to the point where she was like, I want to learn how to do the Vulcan neck or the nerve pinch, which she does learn how to do. And I had never really considered, like, why wouldn't more Romulans study some of those techniques, especially in the Tal Shiar. And so I thought that was a really interesting way to add to the story and just made it more interesting. And, this is the one part of the story that I'm really looking forward to seeing how it turns out, because, at the end when she's getting betrayed by Varric, like no one could see that one coming, because they've been planning together. They've been sleeping together. They've, everything. And she even told him to his face, like, you are somebody I can trust, because if you wanted me dead, you would have killed me a long time ago. And, he's clearly playing the long game, or he's now just under whatever kind of mind control the Empress is too. So, this was a very good continuation of the story that we started in the first book. This is kind of what I wished more of the book was.
Yeah, no, I could not agree with you more. And it felt, again, too, kind of very Romulan to have her being blamed. Have all of these games being played inside games, and I would just say, I think, and this is kind of the whole book in general, unfortunately, this book is really not well written, and so nothing really comes across very well. I feel like a lot of the characters feel very juvenile in the way that they're written. The voices of the characters, especially the ones we know, never feels right, and that's a real frustration. And so I think every part of this book needs a good edit to create better dialogue, better framing for everything, and this is definitely part of the story where I felt that as well. But this, like you said, I think is probably the most interesting part of the story, because meanwhile on Voyager, they're trying to figure out how to use that, and they call this, and this is a quote from the book, that damn ball that Tianan gave them, and how they're supposed to cure dark matter from apparently the entire universe or whatever. Yeah. And then they run into the species that they help, the Kawasi. And I don't know, this just, I think the problem with this is that the story just feels like it's spinning its wheels.
Well, like, it's almost like the story got set up in the first book and they didn't know where to go from there. Reading that damn ball so many times through this was, I mean, it was fine the first time, but then the fact that they like legit called it that for quite a while was, it was less funny the more it went on. And, I like the idea of this story and this mission that Voyager is going to go on, as far as like trying to capture and contain all this mutated dark matter. It is weird to me that the Shepherds didn't give them more information and they're making everybody figure it out for themselves. But they do, which good, because otherwise we couldn't go on with the story. But yeah, the stuff with the Kawasi, man, I was getting frustrated, and we've seen episodes of Voyager like this, or of any Star Trek show, where the aliens that they're helping are very ungrateful and demanding and everything. But this culture, I feel like, kind of takes the cake as far as wanting to put Telecramor on trial for his actions that led to all this dark matter coming into our universe, which, you can kind of understand, but whereas, on the planet that Chakotay and Paris are on, we've got kind of this dichotomy of very technological and no technological. This one's super litigious, and I'm almost wondering, are we going to find another part of the planet that is absolutely forgiving, and it was getting frustrating at the end, and I know it was frustrating for Janeway and the crew, but it was a little too much, and it almost seemed just like a way to set up for whatever's going to happen in the next book with the crew. And I really don't even care about the Kawasi. I want to find out what's going to happen with the dark matter, and
exactly.
I'm worried that this is going to take away from that.
Yeah. Well, because too, so they take Janeway hostage, and Telecramor is able to commune with the ball, and gets a message that Liu is even worse than we thought before, but we don't have any indication exactly why. And so it just creates this cliffhanger of a bump, bump, bum, but it feels so trite, and it feels so done. And there's, again, the story feels so disconnected from itself in many ways, so that I don't really feel like we're building to anything. And I find that to be very frustrating. And so, like you said, there's too much of the story, which I don't really care about. I do kind of just want to see how the dark matter is dealt with and finally eliminated. But as per actually how that happens, I don't really care. And I think that's the thing that this book is doing, is that it's really leaving me in a place where I'm not really invested or interested in most of this story, because I don't feel like the book is doing a very good job of keeping me invested or helping build the tension and build the story, so that third book is the payoff for all the things that we've been building. Too much of this feels so unmoored from the rest of it that I don't really there's really no good connection points.
It's either a blessing or a curse that these books are pretty short. This was a very quick read, which was nice. But I feel like it says a lot about a book, or, for me, when the parts of the book that I find most interesting are not even with our main characters. We read these books to get stories with our characters, with our Voyager crew. But I'm so not invested in what's going on Voyager. I'm more invested in what's going on with Chakotay and Paris, but really it's the Romulan stories that I'm so interested in. And I feel like they could have actually expanded to be a bigger part even of this whole story. But I have a feeling that when these books were written, the main focus had to be on the main crew. Cause there's been Star Trek books that focus a lot on people or crews or aliens that, I've never even heard of before. And I don't really care for those, because I want to see my crew. And so it's disappointing in this one too, that I don't really care what's going on with the crew and Harry, he's poor Harry is just in love again. And, it's not unrequited, but it's a little unreachable for him, as it usually seems to be. It's just another case of why'd they have to go there?
Yeah, I found this really frustrating. Of course, he falls for the beautiful visitor from this other world, Kahala, and she falls for him. But, she doesn't like music, and she thinks it's evil, and she doesn't like to eat non-replicated food because she also finds that evil. So they're just at an impasse. Will they make it? Find out next time on, Archie's Comics. This is a part of the story. but it is another place to which I have absolutely no interest, and and this is not me being mean, but I just don't care. Like, it's, and I think part of it is because it feels so childish. And I think the depth of the story and the idea that you're dealing with here of, having an alien species that has these kind of issues, there's no depth at all to it. And so I am left in that place where it's like, okay, that's weird, but so.
I don't even know what else to say.
Yeah, I don't either, which I think is a good time to rate Ghost Dance. So, Casey, what will you rate this second book in the Dark Matters trilogy?
I wanted to be super generous and give it like 3.5 stars and I think it was because I enjoyed the Jekri and the Romulan story, but especially as we've talked about it more, I mean, I rated it as a 3 on Goodreads, and I'll stand behind that, but it's not the strongest 3 in the world. I will say though that I think I did like this book a bit better than the first one, and I'm hoping that improves. Like, if I could give 3 stars to all 3 of these books, I'd be okay with that. But I am dying to know what you gave this one.
Well, if I was being as harsh as I wanted to be, I would give this book a 1. But I'm going to give this book a 2, being generous. But I think we said it all in the sense of our frustrations as to why this book just doesn't work. And I can't say that I liked it more than the first book. I think it's pretty on par with that. Maybe it's a little bit better. But I think this book actually might be worse for me because it feels more disconnected from itself and the story it's trying to tell, with these elements that I just don't see what the connection points are. And, I don't know. I mean, I've been talking about media, books, comics, movies, television for a long time, and I'm not an idiot, I don't think. But I'm sure people will tell me I am on social media, because that's what that's for. And if I'm having an issue figuring out where the connection points are really supposed to come from, that's not a good thing. And so, yeah, this book is a 2 for me, and maybe the third book will redeem it. I don't know. But I'm interested. Next time we'll be diving into the Star Trek Deep Space Nine Rebels series, and we'll see what happens there. But yeah, who knows?
I'm glad we had some good comics this week, because the book was a little bit lackluster. But I don't want to tell anybody else what to think, because this could very well be somebody's favorite book. I'd be surprised. I would love for somebody to tell us in the Babel conference that this was their favorite book and why. But unfortunately, they can't all be winners. And I'm looking forward to next time. We'll get more comics and see what's going on Deep Space Nine and go from there. And we'll eventually get back to the third book here and be done.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. I am excited to be able to see what happens, where we go, and we have a couple of other new books that will be coming out this year that we'll get a chance to talk about. But I think some of our ideas have been, Casey, as well, to cover some of the books that we haven't covered. I think there were some Mirror Universe books we haven't talked about. There were some Lost Age books, like Buried Age, we haven't talked about, or Never Ending Sacrifice. Some hardcovers, Star Trek hardcovers used to be such a big deal, so we thought about maybe covering some of those as well. So there's a lot that we have in the hopper, even though we're not getting a ton of new books. But one of the things we are actually also going to be able to talk about, Casey, when they come out, we've got the Art of Star Trek Picard coming out from seasons 1 through 3, so we'll discuss that. We have the making of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, coming out this year as well. So there are some things that are going to be happening new, might not necessarily be novels, but are going to be in books that we'll be able to cover. So I'm so excited for that as well. But, Casey, if people wanted to be able to talk to you and see what else you've got going on outside of Literary Treks, where would they find you?
Well, I'm probably most active right now on Goodreads and Letterboxd at Knitting Trekkie. I doom scroll Twitter rarely anymore, and I really don't do much on Instagram, so I'll stop saying those. It's just really Goodreads and Letterboxd. And then also the Babel Conference. That's actually, I'm still on Facebook, so yeah, definitely find me there.
Well, you can also find me all over the place. The place I'm most active, MattRushing02 on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero. You can also find me, of course, here on the network. I've got the 602 Club, which is our general geek show, and we talk about all of those fandoms outside of Star Trek, and so hope you'll join us there. It's a lot of fun. Doing some other Star Trek shows, though. You can find me doing Warp 5 about Star Trek Enterprise. We're going through our 20th anniversary rewatch. We've got The Orb about our 30th anniversary rewatch of Deep Space Nine. We've got Saddle Up about Strange New Worlds, which we found out is going to be starting again in the summer in June. I'm so excited to have that back. And The Artificial Tango, Star Trek Picard Season 3. We are continuing to talk through that, and you can't miss it over there. So we hope you will join us. But as always, we just appreciate your joining us here on Literary Treks. And until next time, live long
and read on.
You call that light reading? To each his own, number one.